I'm Amelia from Somo, and we work with micro and small businesses in East Africa.
You can have all the list of all the entrepreneurs that are involved and more info of what they do.
We've been around for the last 8 years, and we work across Kenya. We work in 18 counties in Kenya. We work in the northern regions of Tanzania and also now in northern Uganda. I grew up in New York mostly. I'm from the US originally, and I booked a one-way ticket to Nairobi 13-ish years ago, and that's how I ended up here. So I had no real plan, but I found my way into an informal area in Nairobi, the area we're sitting in right now called Kibera. And this is where I started my work. So I started working with schools and educational nonprofits. And I did that for a while. I went back and forth between the US. I was studying at UC Berkeley and in California. And one of the things that I kept seeing through the work that I was witnessing and taking part in was a lack of sustainability in a lot of the models I saw. There were lots of foreigners coming in, starting projects. Many of these projects had very little buy-in from local populations, and that meant that they had very short-term effects. They weren't sustainable. They were not understanding what was actually needed in these communities and a lot of the local context that existed. So on the side, I started working with youth groups and young people that were starting businesses. And I supported one in particular that was making different sellable products out of waste material. And so, provided some, probably at that time, pretty awful business training. Really, our programs have grown from our team, from our entrepreneurs, building out what is actually needed across the areas we work in. And at that time, we provided a little bit of financing, a little bit of access to market, a little bit of training, and that's where Somo grew out of. And our name comes from the root of the Swahili word masomo. And so, masomo meaning lessons. We are all constantly learning, and that's really the core of the organization and how we built the organization. From the lessons we teach as an organization, lessons we learn from our entrepreneurs, lessons that together we learn as a community. And that's how we've built our programs, our tools, and how our model works as we start to expand across East Africa. I had not had a lot of experience traveling in the world, and I picked Nairobi as a place on a map, and I ended up here. And sometimes it is helpful to be young and learn as you are creating things. I think often foreigners come into this geography and think they know the solutions of how to build things. And one of the helpful things about knowing you don't know anything is you're just there learning. And that is what I did in the early days of spending in Nairobi, was learning. I learned the matatu systems and the train system. I used to commute from Umoja to this side of town by train. And I learned how this city worked, and then slowly learned how different parts of the region worked without a lot of preconceptions of what would work or not work in this type of space. And I think that's been really helpful with how we built the organization ultimately. We don't come in with ideas of this is how you solve problems. We want to get resources, capital, training, and access to markets and expansion for these businesses to our entrepreneurs that know their communities super well and understand what is actually needed in those areas, and understand how you can create meaningful jobs in those areas, which we are big believers in are the solution to a lot of challenges. Once you give people a job, a meaningful job, and a livelihood, that gives them the ability to live life on their own terms. So I did study a mixture of economics, business, and that at UC Berkeley, but a lot of our curriculum has honestly been built by our entrepreneurs and by our team that comes from the areas we work in. So bringing, skills, but then how do we make those skills localized? How do we utilize real stories of, when we're teaching something around like cost of sales, how do we utilize real stories of our entrepreneurs to build out models of training that are not theoretical, that are actually based in the realities in our areas. A lot of how our programs are designed, both our training and advisory programs, are not to, come in with a lot of theory. We're just going to dump a bunch of facts on you and then you go back and somehow incorporate that in your business, even though it makes no sense with the actual business you're running. But instead we do short trainings. They're often very gamified. They're often very based in the actual businesses our entrepreneurs are running, and then they go out and practice that, work with entrepreneur advisors who are other entrepreneurs in their communities that have gone through Somo programs to support them with that implementation, and then come back with those lessons and have that discussion. And they are constantly supporting in how we change those trainings, those tools, to make them better and better support them and future businesses that are part of our programs. So I think our initial training cohort, we had like 40 people come and sign up for an info session. And that initial program, we had 10 entrepreneurs. That was back in 2016. We had 10 entrepreneurs go through that program. I had been working in some of the informal communities in Nairobi for a bunch of years before launching Somo. So I already had a presence in those areas. I knew a lot of community groups. I knew a lot of youth groups. I have known some of the youth here for over a decade at this point. And so they're probably not youth technically anymore. And so I already had some of those deep relationships. And then our initial entrepreneurs are the entrepreneurs that recruited the next entrepreneurs, and kind of the ability to recruit became a lot easier as we started providing support to entrepreneurs over time. So we have 10 hubs, that's in Kenya and Tanzania. Our digital reach is also in Uganda, where our learning, reporting, and investment platforms are also present. We are a team of 62 people across Kenya and Tanzania, and we work out of those different hubs. So our places for training and advisory are also our places to work. So like our tech team is seated upstairs, and that's where they work from. They build our tools from the communities we actually work in. We have over 10,400 entrepreneurs that have gone through our trainings on our digital learning platforms. We've graduated 3,500 entrepreneurs from our boot camps, which are through blended training programs, so a mixture of in-person and virtual programs. And then we've invested in about 650 businesses. Those businesses have now created and impacted over 15,000 jobs. So those are the jobs our businesses are creating, and the livelihoods they're supporting to create. In terms of some of what we've built, so we talked a little bit about the training and advisory programs. One of the things that is unique about Somo is we have built all of our own digital tools. So we have tools for learning, we have tools for reporting, we have tools for investing. And those tools allow us to, one, better reach entrepreneurs in more marginalized communities. We partner with community-based organizations to allow our tools to reach more informal areas and urban areas and more rural communities. So our reach is pretty wide across the geographies we work in. Those learning platforms allow us to start collecting data early, though, on businesses, and then those entrepreneurs start to report through our reporting tools. So our reporting tools will work off of your most basic technology that works, that kind of is accessible to all the entrepreneurs we work with. So it works off of USSD, it works off of WhatsApp, we have a web browser version as well. And that allows us to gather real-time financial and impact data on businesses. That financial and impact data is then automatically generates an alternative credit scoring system. And so we use that weighted score to determine how we invest in businesses. So one big area of our model is actually investing directly in businesses. So we manage a bunch of funds that allow us to invest alternative forms of capital in underbanked entrepreneurs. So we invest non-commercial forms of capital with the goal to build our businesses up to a point that they can now start accessing more formal forms of credit. And that then helps them with being able to, more formalize their business, get their business to a stage that now they can start growing through, your more formal forms of investment, like through banks or SME investors, et cetera. So they're learning business skills. So they're learning financial literacy, customer service, they're learning marketing tactics, they're learning how to sell their products across both their communities, but also how to get them into external communities. We also have a technical aspect of that. So through our production facility, entrepreneurs can learn technical skills in food production and hygiene beauty production. And those, we also support them in getting things like KEB certified in Kenya and other certifications they need to start to export their products. We teach them about export markets, how to get into those export markets. So it depends on the stage an entrepreneur is going through. The most basic level is our digital business training, and then they'll get more advanced training in our different boot camps. So we have a more basic one, and then we have a social and green boot camp. And then they'll get more customized advisory services if we invest in that business. So businesses that we invest in will then work for a period of 2 years to support them in additional BDS. We work with entrepreneurs in both a capacity building function, but we also invest directly in businesses. And that investment side, I think, is where there's often a really large challenge for businesses, especially coming from the areas we work in. You look at your average business across your informal urban area or rural community, and they're micro. I mean, Somo businesses alone are coming in at idea stage. 54% are at idea stage, less than 10% are registered, and less than 5% have any operating reports. So they're not going to be able to go and access your formal financing. And so the financing options that are out there are extremely limited. You're looking at, your fast mobile money lending types of platforms where, you're repaying within 30 days, you're accessing tiny amounts of capital. You're never going to grow a business with that and the extremely high interest rates. You look at banks and you need credit history, you need collateral. Our entrepreneurs have neither. And you look at SME investors and they expect sizes of businesses that are just way higher than your average business across the areas we work in. So that's where Somo fills a big gap of, we work on the capacity building side really to build businesses up to a stage that they can now access that financing. And so that financing is key in how we then provide support to businesses to get them to a place they can be formal, start to access more formal institutions, and really be able to build their businesses and create those jobs. So creating now over 15,000 across the communities we work in. And so with that, like some of the impact that we've seen on businesses over time is how do they go from that like extremely informal or idea stage to building a real business. So just to give some examples, there's a business run by Maureen in Kisumu. She runs a business called Modesh, and it's a bakery business. And when she first started with Somo, she was baking like kind of small cakes in an informal way. She came into our training program and wanted to build out this baking school and a model that could actually expand and supply supermarkets across Western region. And Maureen from Modesh now is built both through the training advisory and then also the financing she's accessed through Somo. She's built a business that's employing 15 women in Kisumu. And as well, she's created over 30 jobs across the value chain with women that she's trained through her programs and who have set up businesses or then became employed somewhere else. So Maureen is an example of an entrepreneur entered at a very, very early stage and now has grown this business that is expanding. And her next steps for her are she's built out cookie lines that are made from cassava and crickets. And those now she's working on getting the export license to get those into an export market too and grow the business even further through that. So Maureen's an example of the type of business we work with that's committed to both a social focus with training young women to provide them employment opportunities, also creating products that are, a healthy alternative like crickets or cassava as an alternative to your average cookie. And then as well, she's building a business that is actually creating meaningful jobs in that community and has the potential to grow. Another example is Rosalie from Mombasa. She runs a shoemaking business that makes shoes out of recycled tires. They sell those shoes now across the coast of Kenya through resellers. She works with over 100 resellers that are selling her shoes. And she built that business from kind of this initial tiny little room where she had guys working the floor, producing those shoes by hand. And now through Somo and through an investment through one of our financing partners, she's been able to build out a factory in Likoni where she's now employing over 30 people to produce those shoes and is now looking into as well export markets. How does she get these products into export markets and create more jobs through that? So we work specifically in what we define as marginalized communities. So we work in informal urban areas and rural communities. So we're looking for entrepreneurs in those areas. Some of our programs, as I mentioned, work with basic businesses. A lot of them are focused on your social and green business. So we look for businesses in spaces of like circularity, building ag or agro-processing businesses, businesses in clean energy, businesses in education. Those are some of the different areas we'll look for businesses in. And one of our key things though is creating jobs. So if the business has a potential to create jobs, then that is a business we're interested in looking at. Our average business 4 years post working with Somo is employing directly 11 people. So have full-time, part-time employees of 11 people. And that's the type of business we want to work with, and those that can even expand beyond that, like the examples of Maureen and Rosalie. And so that's the first qualification. Then a lot of what is a qualification beyond that is going through the different stages with Somo. So what we found is we can utilize data, both data from our learning platforms and our reporting tools, to basically determine which businesses are going to be the best investments. And so best investments meaning that they're going to be able to continue growing, continue being able to expand to new areas. They're going to be able to create meaningful jobs in those areas, and the entrepreneur is going to be committed to this business long term and running it and making it a sustainable enterprise. And so we utilize that data at each stage to determine how we continue to invest in a business. So that's really what we're utilizing. We're utilizing our real-time data from all of our different platforms to be able to choose businesses that we will invest more and more of our resources in. Yeah, so the data I mentioned, we utilize it for that exact piece as well. So we'll look at, for instance, with some of our loan portfolios, so provide non-commercial capital at 5% annualized interest, and those businesses are accessing capital that I mentioned between 50,000 Kenya shillings and 2 million. And we will utilize data on, for instance, how good a repair someone is versus what they scored on our scorecard. So all the aggregated data that we're pulling in, we'll utilize all those different measurements and then understand, okay, this is a business that was like we scored them well because of all this different automated aggregated data versus how they're actually doing with their payments, building their business, etc. post that investment. And so we look at those pieces of data together to understand what is the impact that we're having from those different investments, and how can we maybe adjust that criteria, adjust our programs to better fit the needs of those businesses. We're also doing, right now, we're in process of doing an evaluation to look at those different stages of support. So, an entrepreneur that receives just digital training from Somo versus our hands-on boot camps versus our investment and additional BDS. What is the impact at all those different stages? And how are we investing capital versus the impact that these businesses are creating and that our programs are having on that individual. So we utilize data at every stage. I mentioned our name Somo comes from lessons, so we're utilizing those lessons to change our programs, adjust our programs, and better create that impact. So we have funding that comes directly from partners. We work with banks and impact funds to be able to create portfolios that are specifically focused on this non-commercial forms of capital. So we're working with underbanked entrepreneurs to get them to a stage that they can access more formal forms of financing. So we work with partners like Standard Chartered Foundation, we work with DTB in Tanzania on the bank side, and then we also work with impact funds like Bestseller Foundation and Optimizer Foundation to allocate capital directly into businesses that we then manage as Somo and utilize all of our data to be able to determine how we make those investments. Every community we work in is very different. We definitely have learnings every time we're opening up in a new area. I think there's always those different politics, those different realities on the ground, different ways things work. So we definitely have committed. 90% of our team actually comes from the communities we work in, and that's important to us for many reasons because of how we build our programs and our tools, but also because of understanding those communities. There is no way that me or any other one of our team members is going to understand all the intricate details of every single community we work in. But our local team in each area really understands that. And so that's one of the ways that we've addressed that and dealt with that over the years. Obviously, when there's more political instability or anything along those lines, the communities we work in get hit the hardest and the fastest, and so that's always something we have to be aware of and make sure our team's safe, our entrepreneurs are safe, making sure that we're taking care of the community that we've built in each area. When as well, I think a challenge has been, our entrepreneurs are not. A lot of technology that's been built in East Africa has been designed for like a smartphone with apps. That's not the reality, at least for a lot of our entrepreneurs when they're starting to work with Somo. And so why we built all of our tools to work on things like USSD, voice services, is because our entrepreneurs, that is the technology they're actually using. And so being able to adjust that technology, understanding language, understanding usage of mobile devices has been very important for us. And back to the local context as well, it's different in every area. I've been to rural areas in the region where someone has a basic phone that they're utilizing for M-Pesa, but these 3 buttons don't work, and so they can't maybe utilize our USSD code as it is. And so you have to build that technology to actually work around what they are able to access. And then ensure there's training around it too, so that they're understanding this is what they're reporting. Now how do we understand these financials so we can better our business and start to grow it over time? So we're in midst of now expanding across East Africa. So if anyone is ESO, entrepreneurial support organization, or community-based organization that wants to be able to utilize our curriculum, utilize our digital tools, and be able to access, some of the financing models that we've set up. That's something that we're very interested in getting in touch right now as we start this expansion. And we want to partner with as many of those organizations as possible to provide all the tools and learnings that we've had so that we can reach as many entrepreneurs with this as possible. So that's our next few years is going to be focused on that, and how do we continue to expand to be able to reach more entrepreneurs, create more jobs, and give people the livelihoods they need to live life on their own terms. Real quick, I realized I forgot one thing.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll be able to fit it in, but we have our Somo Sokos happening. So another component of what we do is we work with entrepreneurs to provide access to markets across the region, but also looking at export markets. And as part of that, we have Somo Sokos happening in Kenya over the next few weeks, which are market spaces where someone can come, they can meet our entrepreneurs, buy products, learn about the different businesses we work with. And so those are happening in Mombasa, Kisumu, and Nairobi. So on the 23rd in Mombasa, 29th in Kisumu, and 7th in Nairobi, we'll be having those market days. And we hope everyone can come make it.